So as people come in and the doors close, we now walk towards our next session, which is decoding consumer behavior. And this panel is made up of eminent experts, and I'll introduce them one by one. So first, Halima Jumani, and she is a Virgo. I love Virgos. I mean, they're beautiful people, always perfect. She loves and is passionate about data and music, so both the analytical and the emotional. She fears building systems that scale, but that don't serve and solve what cannot be adopted swiftly, which is, I think, an excellent way to think about life in general. Her secret joy is playing the flute, where she finds clarity, creativity, rhythm that inspires, and problem-solving mindset. With her comes John Barber, and John is a Libra. Now, Virgo and Libra is perfectly balanced. He is passionate about golf. I also love golf. It's a walk with a purpose. His greatest fear is his daughter making him go on upside down after roller coasters. Fair enough. And he has a secret, which is that he has 5 tattoos, and hopefully he'll share them with us. And this will be hosted by Melis Ertem, and she is the CEO of MMA Mina. So it's like having God herself on stage with us. And just to give you a bit more background on her, she is a Leo. Her greatest passion is seeing the potential in businesses and people and working towards it, working to realize that potential. So she is a catalyst. Her greatest fear is the dentist. Absolutely right. I can't bear the dentist. And her secret is she's a deeper spiritual person, and she senses how things would turn out most of the time. So she's got a little bit of inside clarity. Please join us on stage. Where are you all? There you are. Join us.
So, thank you so much for this lovely introduction, as always. So today we're going to try to unlock how data and AI is changing the consumer behavior and the way we actually create meaningful insights out of that. And we have our great speakers. So Halima, you lead Kipsons, and that's one of the most forward-thinking consumer delivery brand in the UAE. Joan, the VP Marketing Communications of Tecom Group, actually you've created integrating behavioral insights and AI into Tecom Group's DNA in marketing. And Kartik, practically you live and breathe with data and AI. So you help marketers create insightful and meaningful insights. I'm sorry, I'm going to use the insights again. Out of everything they do, they collect, and how they actually do that. So I'm going to start with you, Halima. I know you use data, and I know you use AI. So what did you achieve with that? So maybe it would be useful to actually hear from a brand how that goes on a brand perspective.
So Kipsons has been a wholesaler of fresh produce in Dubai for over 40 years. So primarily, we were into importing and distributing to wholesalers. And about 7 years ago, when we pivoted to what is now called e-commerce, what we then called home delivery, I think our USPs were very simple and clear. We wanted to make sure that we deliver the wholesale quality and the wholesale prices that would give us a sustainable and scalable future. So when we speak of these criteria in a very low margin business, customers have very simple expectations that our prices have to be low and reliably, predictable. The delivery has to be on time, the quality has to be top-notch. So my entire focus of utilizing data was to meet these expectations, not really to increase revenue by doing something fancy on their apps. And supply chain is a very difficult concept when you're thinking about produce that will die very soon. So if you think about it, if we need to plan demand, if we overplan demand, it ends up in wastage. If we underplan demand, we end up in not only loss of sales, but also customers very irritated by that lack of fulfillment. So fulfillment is a key. So it's a seesaw. And my focus was to drive data to balance that seesaw as efficiently as possible, because that is one of the key components in your pricing element. So benchmarking competitors to make sure that we are the lowest in the market is an external mechanism, right? It's one way of looking at your price. But if you're lowest in the market, but you're bleeding internally, it doesn't make any sense. So I think I spent the last 5 years in figuring out how to manage this supply chain successfully. And what have I achieved? I've achieved 100% all local POs are automated. So they are system-driven, they are system-generated. If you are a supplier of Gibsons in the UAE, you would know that. How did that help us internally? Our wastages were already very low because we are a family business, so we look at things very closely. But this drove that down to another 50%. Help us keep that target of low everyday prices for fresh produce, which is not easy.
Wonderful. Okay, so John, I want to go back to you. So Gibsons have kind of like, Halima had a very clear vision on what she wanted to do, but you've been talking about a lot like the AI hype and the data hype and the real gap between what the companies are capable of and how to use that. And in reality, it becomes the AI and data washing at some point. So how do you overcome that? What do you see there as the gap?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're having a good day here at Atlantis. We're in the relationship business, ultimately, and to some extent, we've always had access to various degrees of data on our consumer, our customer, our business partners. And we've been able to use that to varying degrees to help tailor the messages we deliver. But fundamentally, we are about creating stories and creating two-way conversation and creating not engagement for percentage sakes in social media, but actually driving an alignment between the end consumer and the belief in the brand, and how we align and how we stay together. And that's not changed. Whether that was the coffee houses of old hundreds of years ago wanting to tell stories and wanting to connect, it's the same today. The danger is that there is less requirement for it now, and we can hide behind a screen. And I see huge and increasing value of data behind the scenes, but I do have concerns about how we use it front-facing and how we interpret that data as absolute fact and then deliver a message without a human sanity check on the messages and the stories and the conversations that we're trying to have. And I think we sit in a very interesting time at the moment where the proliferation of data is so vast, and whether it is through AI or whether it is generated through social reports that we get, that we forget or dilute the impact of human conversation. And I think that is going to remain critical in our industry as we battle the challenges of how to embrace machine learning, AI, and how much data and analysis we currently have on our partners and our customers.
Okay. So I'm gonna, from there, I mean, storytelling is a very important piece still, nevertheless, but there is, again, a tsunami of data. And Kartik, your company actually takes care of that and teaches companies, marketers, how to use that, how to make meaningful insights out of that. So what's the strategic advantage there? How do you do that?
I think the first and most important thing is, as a brand, we putting the consumers at the center. And then trying to look at what is the kind of needs that they have, what is the kind of positive impact that we want to create for the consumer is the most important mindset that the brands or any of the teams would require to adopt first, number one. When you start off with that question, you work backward to look at what are the key inputs that's going to help you solve those consumer questions, consumer problems, or consumer behavior that we are trying to address. And the first input to that is data, right? And you use the right word that there is a data tsunami. Wherever we go, people talk about a ton of zero-party, first-party data, etc. So what's very, very fundamental, very important in the current era, in the current situation is, especially with the phasing out of third-party cookies happening, we keep hearing that, and a lot of changes happening, right? How do you adopt a long-term vision, a long-term strategy to create those data solutions which are truly scalable? And that's your first input. Once you understand what those data sources are, how do you synthesize them? How do you bring them onto a data layer, a platform which is truly scalable and actionable, right? Like that goes back to your marketers, goes back to your media agencies, creative agencies who can now go target those consumers in a very impactful, meaningful manner. It's like not media first, but it is more consumer first. So that's the kind of connection that we need to start adopting, right? Like you put the consumer in the center, look at what are the key inputs required for that, which is data, and then build the right kind of technology platforms that can synthesize and bring meaningful insights through this data. This can be done through a lot of machine learning, AI solutions, etc. And then you look at where these consumers are. You start targeting them in a very, very impactful, relevant manner. So that's how I probably would look at this.
Wonderful. So from there, I'm going to take it and go back to Halima. So Kartik has been talking about like how to use data, and that takes a lot of courage for brands, especially companies like yours, 40 years of legacy. Converting that into a machine that's using data as well should be different. So difficult. How did you overcome that? How did you create the idea that it wasn't a hurdle for the employees, but basically they coped with that understanding?
It's a very good question, because where Kartik comes from, it's very easy. He comes from an industry which starts with data. So it's a given. I come from an industry where I was working with traders, buyers and sellers, and they spoke of deals in containers of oranges and apples. So for me, I suppose the challenge was to have that shift, that mindset shift, that data actually can help us. And it has a deeper long-term meaning, which is better than doing a container sales or a vessel sale of oranges. So I think that shift was my biggest challenge in a trading home and a family-owned home. I suppose if you keep the customer first, which is absolutely correct, so that you're not picking your projects for the sake of picking data projects, but they are meaningful to the customer first. And then you slowly implement that at every level of the organization. So it's not just a top-down approach, it's a top-down and bottom-up approach, where people need to slowly see those impacts and say, okay, it is making our lives easy, as well as adding profitability, as well as meeting the targets of the consumers. So there's no point in using data if we are not touching a sweet spot for the customer. And I spoke of cost, that is one thing, but to have that timely delivery is another. But I think above all, what we target is the fulfillment. So the low price is a given, but the customers want what they want when they want. And everything we do in the back end is working towards that, and one department at a time, creating that mindset that everything is about making sure that our numbers are better and we work easier. I'll give you an example. We do about 150,000 deliveries a month, but including all my departments in my e-commerce, we are only about 100 people at the office level. So it's a very lean organization. And that is the eventual result of data becoming the center of everything we do. So my finance is automated. I get my P&L fully allocated, fully optimized. My payroll takes only 4 hours a month. It's in HR, it's in finance, it's in supply chain, it's in the picking, it's in the last mile. It's a mindset that took me 5 years to build. So it's not a short-term solution. It's a long journey. It requires that vision. It requires changing how people think who are not data-oriented.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a complete mind shift, right? So it's pretty much what we try to do with the MMA. So basically we're trying to shift minds of everyone to rather doing everything conventionally, changing, using the technologies. So from there, I have a question for John and Kartik at the same time. So in this tsunami of data, how do you still sustain clarity? And with hyper-personalization, we all say as marketeers, we're very happy with it, but is it invasive? Where do you stop? Where does the ethical boundary start, especially in a multicultural community, I would say? So maybe, John, we can start with you.
You say we're all, as marketeers, delighted by hyper-personalization. I think, yes, in its essence, but it's also just a little concerning. I wonder if Gibsons know more about what's in my fridge right now than I do. And when my wife last put an order in, and you haven't ordered avocados in the last 5 days, and your kids devour them, so I know I'm ready to put another order in, is great as long as you mention, you're bringing value back to the customer first. If that allows me to make my life easier in first instance, rather than a mindset of, I can sell this guy a load more avocados and make some more money, then I think there's a value add in that hyper-personalization, and there is a benefit for the business, whichever it may be. Sorry to analyze your business, but a benefit for any business of the interpretation of that hyper-personalization. But we have perhaps a bigger responsibility in our business than ever before, and increasingly so day by day. Not to make sure we follow GDPR and data protection, but ethically and through our values set of how we truly manage that data. And I think we've already started to see a consumer pushback to that. Because the consumer's not daft. They know, 10 years ago, we were able to send EDMs saying, "Hi, John," at the start of every EDM. And now we've moved to an extent where that whole conversation can be AI generated without a human, to have a two-way interactive conversation in your tone of voice, in however many different languages, at an instant when we think you need it. And there's a reticence, I think, as much as anything from a consumer to receive that level of personal communication. So how do we take that level of data that we have, ethically manage it, to be able to provide value add back to the consumer in first instance that is going to benefit our brand and our value sets over the long term?
Okay, so Kartik.
Yeah. again, just taking a step back, is personalization important from a consumer perspective? Absolutely yes. I would love to get a very curated recommendation from Gibson's, looking at what my consumption is, vegetarian versus health conscious. I would love to have that. But can it be invasive? That's the kind of demarcation we need to have to say how much of data and how do I kind of source this data in an ethically sourced manner is very, very important. And that's where the mindset shift is super important for brands or companies to implement a long-term data strategy. For example, when we look at the kind of, or the sources of data, it can start off with a zero-party data. A very simple explanation of what a zero-party data could be, that what people are saying, or what is that they want. I can just send an in-app quick survey to say, hey Karthik, do you like to have processed mango juice or a fresh mango juice, right? And if that information can be passed on to Gibson's and they're delivering me fresh mango juice, would be super personalized and relevant. Number one. Number two is the first party data, which is what I do on a platform. Again, coming from my previous experiences working at Amazon, Coupang, right? We exactly would understand what consumer behavior are or what their preferences are, so that we give them more relevant, personalized information back to them to say, okay, is this what you are expecting or what we recommend to you? That becomes not invasive, but something that is more relevant for them, number one, and a lot of times wowing those customers. So how do you kind of deploy a data strategy complying to the regulations, the data privacy components is very, very critical. So for the companies, it is about, okay, how do I kind of look at these various data sources and how do I kind of bring them together from a long-term perspective is super critical, right? So that's where you are addressing both ends of the spectrum. One, I want to be hyper-personalized. Number two, I want to be privacy compliant, regulatory compliant, etc.
Okay, so I would like to wrap up in general. So one last message to the audience from each of you, so that what should be their takeaway if they are in the journey of using AI and data, whether they're a legacy business or very advanced, it doesn't matter. So what would be your one message to the audience, starting from John?
Wow. I'm a talker, so I'll try and get this under 30 seconds, but I've failed miserably, repeatedly. Don't use data for data's sake. Don't get overexcited by the current hype that it's fun and cool and sexy and everyone else is doing it, so we must do it. Agree as, there's more than one, agree as an industry where our values set are on transparency and ethics, particularly around AI and machine learning. I think a lot about the particularly sort of the wellness and healthcare industries of 15, 20 years ago, who were editing and models and various images to create a more positive light that wasn't really a reflection of truth and the pushback that was seen there. Now with AI, I can go to CabSat this afternoon at World Trade Center where I've got an exhibition, and if the stand looks a bit empty, within about 30 seconds I can generate an image that you won't know has got AI-generated people on it and make it look very busy. Is that ethical? Is that the right thing to do? My CEO can't be at a press conference next week. Is it okay if we just drop a photo in there? And you would have no idea. We can do that on our desktops. We can probably do that on our phones this afternoon in an instant. Previously, we needed to go and really think that through, and we really needed to think how we would get it done and who could do it, and it was very technical. Now, every single person in this room has got their hands on the ability to do something very similar to that, and it gets better by the hour, not by the month at the moment, with the pace of change. So I think where my thoughts are at the moment is how do we come together as an industry to ensure that our values set remains in the foreground and that we set a very strong base of transparency, openness, of how we're going to utilize, certainly on the front end, machine learning to benefit the relationship between company and customer.
The way I see it is there's a lot of buzz around AI today, right? Like any summit, conferences, at least like 100, 150 times there is the usage of AI. While I see this as a toolkit, right? Like be it AI, machine learning, a lot of statistical models that we build on a day-to-day basis, I see all of these as enablers or as a toolkit. You should not be like taking a spread and spray approach, right? But rather use them very diligently. Like I said, put the consumers, put the customers at the very center, and then see what is the toolkit you require to really address that problem, right? Some might even require some common sense. You don't have to do any kind of data analysis. Common sense could prevail, like I'm going back to what BJ said in the morning, right? How can you keep it super simple? So take those kind of approaches, and then wherever there is a rigorous data science or data and machine learning kind of solutions are required, definitely we have to start adopting to it, which means the CTO, the CMO kind of coming together becomes extremely important so that we are solving the CFO's problem also.
Wonderful. And Halima?
So I think in the world of data, cutting through that noise is very important, because there is so much data sometimes, you don't know exactly what you're looking for and why. If your project is actionable, or are you just looking through data to find something eventually. So I think picking your projects, making sure you access them sensibly for the sake of a targeted actionable result is very important. And then you will look for the right cut and slice of that data. That's one. And I always remind my team that regardless of how much data-oriented or machine learning world we live in, there will always be a space for non-data, part. For example, customers at Gibson still want someone to speak to them and have that problem resolved. So that element is important to be reminded every now and again. It has its value. It doesn't matter how many performance ads you see, that sampling that you get into your box still has its value, because you're going through an experience. Mm-hmm. So we have to balance the two and be sensitive to the customer. I'll give you a very small example. I always knew that 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. was our peak time for receiving orders, and there was so much, push from the marketing team that why don't we sell our ads during this time? But the values of our organization were to not be intrusive. So I said, no, these are busy moms. They've gone through a working day. They've battled with the kids' homework and put them to bed, and the husbands and whatnot. And now they're patiently making a grocery list. Let them be. So
Absolutely.
Everything is not, about money. It's
Yeah.
You've got to make sure that you put the customer first, be very sensitive, and use that data wisely to support them. So, one of the small things we've done now is we're looking at the customer profile. It's very simple, actually. And look at the things that you shop frequently, but you haven't really shopped in the last couple of weeks, and they will be at your checkout that have you forgotten your specials. Or, you put like a previously purchased item. So when you search for eggs, you don't have to see a million eggs. You can see the ones that you bought last time up there. So you can say, all right, this is my preference. So very subtle things, which are not, you don't have to go through a hell of machine learning to get there. You can just have common sense and the customer centricity at heart to have those simple wins. And they work. I promise you they work. We get a lot of feedback. They work.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your insights. It was really great. I hope everybody enjoyed. So, thank you.
Thank you all.